Hi, I'm Eric Liu, and I'm going to be playing a session of 510 No Limit Hold'em 6 Max today. So the whole idea behind table selection is you want to look for tables where you don't recognize the names of the players, and also you want to find tables where players aren't sitting at multiple tables, because I mean, if you find someone or a table where all the people on it are sitting at 4 or more tables, you know they're most likely going to be, regulars grinding. So you just usually want to avoid regs because they're going to be one of the better players, and you usually just want to sit with people who you don't recognize are sitting at, 1 or 2 tables. And also another thing to look out for is if they have less than the maximum buy-in, and if it's like an odd number. So like this is 510, and if someone's sitting there with, like $542 and like 82 cents, then they're probably playing with their whole roll, and that's just they're just fooling around, and they're most likely not going to be as good of a player as everyone else. When you're table selecting, average pot size could mean like a few things. Like if you have a player who's not playing very well but they're like splashing around a ton, then obviously average pot size is going to be large. If you have a player that's like kind of weak tight and like limp folding a lot, then the average pot size is going to be small. And on the other side of it, if you have a lot of very aggressive players playing at a deep table, then the average pot size is going to be large because it's going to be a lot of 3-betting, 4-betting, and like just getting it in very light. But if you have a lot of regulars who are more like tight aggressive and they're not going to be raising too many hands, but they're going to play them well, then the average pot size is going to be small. So in my experience, the average pot size isn't going to be too big of an indicator of how good the table is. However, if you look at players per flop, that's something that can give you a pretty good indication. If it's a high percentage, then most of the time there's going to be people who are seeing way too many flops. So a little bit about this table. Everyone on this table is a reg. That's why this is the first table that I was able to get onto. And what that basically means is I'm going to be playing pretty solid, not too out of line. So this guy is already leaving, and what's likely going to happen is everyone's just going to leave. But we'll see what happens. So here I get dealt 5 deuce suited. If this guy raised, I would have folded. It's a hand that I would 3-bet sometimes, but against him, especially the first hand, I don't think it's that good of a play because he's going to be shoving on me pretty light and also calling pretty light. I pick up 7-9 suited here. This is a hand that flops pretty well. I would 3-bet this sometimes, but here I'm just going to call just because I just started the session, and I don't want to get tangled up too much. This is a pretty good flop for me. Sometimes I would check raise here, but against this guy, I don't think he's going to give me too much credit for anything. I can't really have ace-queen. He would expect me to re-raise that pre-flop. So if I check raise, I'm really only representing ace-deuce or deuces, or a flush draw like I have. I feel like by check calling, I can represent an ace a lot more. And now that I've hit my flush, if he has air, I would really expect him to either give up or barrel me 2 more streets to try to push me off an ace. So I'm just going to let him either bet at it, or if he checks behind, I'm just going to bet the river. So he checks behind, and now I don't really expect him to have too much. But if he does have something, I would really expect him to call. A pretty small bet because, he can't really have that good of a hand. The best he can have is something like king-jack where he rivered a king. And even then, I don't really expect him to call. So I'm going to bet somewhat small, like 80. Just hopefully trying to get a call from a king or an ace. I don't really expect him to be making that call though. But I don't expect him to be bluffing either, so I feel like betting is still best there. So now the dynamic gets kind of interesting. This guy sits down. He buys in for $370 or $380 at a 510 table, and this is kind of what I was talking about, Some guy sits down with a random number. It's most likely his entire roll, and he's probably not very good, and he posts right away. So right now, it's pretty evident that I can be raising with a huge range of hands here. But, these two guys are both very good players. They're going to know that I'm going to be doing that. but they're also going to be understanding that they can. So I don't really expect him to be doing this too often with too light of a hand, because they also know that I know that they know, that I'm doing this with like a huge range. But since I just joined and since he really hasn't been doing anything, I'm just gonna re-raise him, because I do expect him to be folding a pretty large percentage of the time. And I think he would expect me to, get all in here with ace jack and tens plus as well. And so he does have something in this spot, so that's unfortunate. I'm just gonna fold. But you kind of see how the thinking goes in this situation. Like, both of us sort of know what's going on, so it's just kind of a high variance play. But I feel like I should still make it, every once in a while. This guy is a little aggressive, so I thought it was a pretty good play at the time. In that spot, it doesn't really matter what my bet sizing is. So I made it relatively small because, if he has something like eights that he's determined to get it all in with, then he's going to be getting it all in with that no matter what. If he has something like 6-7 suited, he's going to be folding it or shoving it. So like if I put him in a spot where he's folding or shoving no matter what, then my bet size is really not very important. However, I mean, if he's going to be in a spot where he can call, getting correct odds to call, then obviously I want to choose to size it bigger or smaller depending on what I want to do. But in that spot pre-flop, it wasn't really the case. I'm just going to pull up a previous hand here. So after the king 5 hand, I fold the jack 10 offsuit in the well, that's under the gun +1. So I mean, I would be folding that sometimes, but since I had just lost that hand, I feel like that's probably a good fold. I wanna regain a much more solid image. Here, ace-6 offsuit. I would be raising this against some players, and in this spot against no luck, I would also be raising sometimes. But I'm just gonna fold here, just to again regain that more solid image, just to be folding a few rounds and hopefully winning a sizable pot with a good hand before I start to get a little more out of line. Here this guy raises, and this guy who doesn't seem to be knowing what he's doing very much calls. I'm just gonna 3-bet here because I do expect this guy to be raising a decent range from under the gun, and I don't expect this guy to have too much too often of the time, and I expect to be able to take it down. But I guess he instantly shoves all in, so I'm obviously gonna have to fold. So now my image is terrible, basically. I got pushed off my hand twice in a row, both pre-flop. So pre-flop, I'm gonna have to be tightening up a ton. And if I weren't doing this for a video, then I would quit this table because I can no longer play profitably the way I want to play. I'm gonna have to play tight, and on this table, it's just not a good thing. So that's what table image is, I guess. You really have to consider how you've been playing and what hands you've gotten into to really adjust your play. And right now, my play needs to be adjusted to be extremely tight. So I'm just going to be folding a lot. Ace-queen offsuit is not something that I would fold under the gun, so I'm going to raise there. I'm not sure what I would do if I get re-raised here, since my image has been kind of crazy, but it's a good thing I don't. The optimal result there would have been someone calls, I flop an ace or a queen, and I get to show down that hand. Then I sort of regain some credit from everyone else, but until then, my image still stays the same. 3-5 offsuit is not a very good hand. Had I been winning, those pots that I just lost, I could 3-bet here and very well get away with it. But, you know, in this spot, everyone's just seeing me as this guy who's just folding, you know, a ton. So because of that, I don't expect to get away with 3-betting there very often, so I would just fold it. I mean, it's not a hand that I would 3-bet a lot at all, but, you know, had I been winning a lot of pots, I would consider 3-betting it, you know, just to, because my dynamic is a winning dynamic. Okay, so this guy limps again. He's been limping a ton. So I'm just going to raise it up with A10 offsuit. Doesn't really matter what hand I have here as long as it flops decently well. I expect to, you know, take it down on the flop a ton of the time. See, here's what I mean. Like, since I've been losing so many pots, even a guy like this is gonna do silly stuff like limp re-raise on the button. You know, I don't really expect that he would do this had I been winning, but since I haven't, you know, he's just doing this. I don't really know what his range is here, but since I do have A10 offsuit, it's such a bad hand, and for him, if I call 30 more, that's like, you know, 8-9% of his stack, and I don't really expect to be flopping well too often of the time. Even though it is a min raise, I expect to be check folding way too much on the flop with a hand like this, so I'm actually just gonna fold it. So here I call with 9-8 suited in position. It's a pretty good flopping hand, but this is a devastating flop for my hand. So I'm just gonna check and give up. These guys are both pretty good. Just because they check doesn't mean they don't have anything. So I don't expect stabbing at it would yield too much profit. Here I flopped a pair of 9s. I mean, it's most likely the best hand. Someone could have a 10, I suppose. I don't think anyone ever has queen jack here. If this guy bets, I don't think he would be bluffing. He most likely would have jacks, queens, or a 10. Since he tank checked, I don't really expect him to have anything. So I'm just gonna leave this table right now. Even though it is somewhat profitable because this guy is not a very good player, I'm just not gonna bother with it. So now we're sitting at a new table. My image is again back to normal. I think people generally think I'm kind of crazy. It really depends on how I've been playing in the last few weeks. If I feel like they think I'm playing pretty crazy and they're just not giving me too much respect, I'm going to tighten up my game. And if I feel like they've adjusted that, I will loosen up. So it really goes on like kind of like a cycle, interesting enough. This table is four-handed and it's also deep with antes, so it's going to play very aggressively. Hopefully we're going to get into some pretty interesting spots. Here I open up king 10 offsuit. It's under the gun, but at the same time it's also the cutoff. It's four-handed, so it's a hand that I would always be opening. Unless like everyone else is crazy, like this guy, unless he's crazy. Then I would be opening up a more narrow range and just, you know, four-betting him a ton for value and as a bluff. King 6 offsuit is not a very good hand. I'm just going to be folding it. So again, this is another table with just only regs. That's why when I joined the table it was full, but now, you know, 2 people have left. No, I don't think anyone thinks that they're very profitable on this table, but it does make for some interesting spots, so I'm just going to sit here. I could 3-bet no luck here, but I don't really expect him to be raising the button too much of the time too light. Since we are deep, I'm just going to fold in the small blind. No luck is very aggressive. Lately, I've been getting into a lot of battles with him, and he's won all of them, pretty much. So I'm actually gonna play very solidly against him until I can gain some sort of edge back. Both these other 2 players are regulars. You know, they pretty much know what to do in a 4-max game. They're gonna be 3-betting me a ton. You know, not really getting too out of line and just making good moves in good places. So here, if I get re-raised, I'm gonna fold, obviously, 4-5 offsuit. This is a kind of flop that I would check behind sometimes with 4-5 offsuit. I'm just gonna bet here. If I bet here, I want to bet like more than one street, because if he has any piece of this flop, which is very likely, then he's gonna call one and then fold the turn a lot. So in that spot, it's good to mix in some air and some made hands, and also check behind with some made hands, and check give up behind with some air, just for balance. Here's 6-10 suited. I'm going to be raising this. It is the cutoff as well. Here Dr. Giggy joins. He's a very good regular. I think he pretty much knows what's going down. You know, he can be aggressive, get out of the line sometimes, and he can play very tight sometimes as well. So if I was trying to make money, I probably wouldn't be playing at this table. The only person I don't know too much about is Born to Run, but he is a regular as well. So it's not a very profitable table. 6 deuce offsuit, not the best of hands. 7-8 suited, however, is a pretty good flopping hand. Last time you saw me call with 9-7 suited in the small blind. Since I have been sort of letting no luck get away with a few things, I was going to 3-bet him there. But as you can see, he's not raising every button, which is why I can't really 3-bet him as much as some other people. But 8-7 suited is such a good flopping hand that I'm definitely going to raise it from the small blind. So in a spot like that, I would rather have 7-8 suited than Ace-6 offsuit, the hand that you saw me fold before. Just because, actually, here I'm going to 3-bet. Pikachu has not been really active, and I expect him to be raising a pretty wide range. I also haven't been really that active either, so I feel like this 3-bet is going to yield some profit. Hopefully no luck folds, and then we take it down. I would definitely call there sometimes as well. I just felt like 3-betting there I'd get away with a good decent portion of the time, just by the way the game's been going. I'm going to fold Jack-7 offsuit. It's a terrible hand. Wouldn't really be raising that from any position, especially with these two guys in the blinds. I don't think it's a very good raise. Against some other people in the blinds, I would, consider raising it, but not this time. So again, 3-6 offsuit. That's just garbage. Not going to be doing anything with that. So I mean, sometimes you're gonna play a lot of interesting situations. Sometimes not so much. This session wasn't really that interesting. We didn't get into any real tough spots. I mean, a few tough spots where I could have bluffed or folded, and I chose to bluff, and it didn't work. But that's about it. So no real spots where I could consider calling. Here, no luck 3-bets me. Ace-10 suited is a great flopping hand. I expect it to be ahead of his range, but since I'm in position and I do want him to make mistakes post-flop, I'm going to just call. He bets. I expect him to be betting this flop with almost 100% of his range. He's the type of player who wouldn't necessarily check queens or jacks there on the flop. I think he would probably just bet out. So I do like to call. Here he checks. I think he expects me to be floating this flop some portion of the time, and also calling with flush draws and stuff to try to take it away with on the turn. So, if he's betting queens or jacks on the flop here, then he's going to be put into kind of a tough spot on the turn. And if he has any weaker ace, he's going to be checking the turn and betting the river. So here I get to put in the bet, put him in a tough spot, and also, check behind on some rivers as well, and sort of get to control the size of the pot. If he check raises here, which I don't expect him to be doing too often of the time, then I feel like I have to fold. Then I'm probably beat. But fortunately, he doesn't, so I get to take it down, which is, a pretty good result. But the reason behind the bet there is because I do expect him to have a calling range that I'm ahead of. Some people would always check the flop there with their pocket pairs, and against a player like that, then I feel like checking behind is a little more viable because you know, they're going to be bluffing the river sometimes, and they're not really going to be calling unless they have you beat, which is obviously not a very good thing. Because it also that also opens you up to getting getting check raised bluffed on the turn, and that's not very good either. So I had ace queen on the button. Obviously that's a raise. This guy, I don't know who he is. So now I expect the dynamic to be changing considerably. Again, he posts. So, you know, that's a good thing. Now this has suddenly turned into a game that I would definitely play in. And if I were playing by myself, I would probably leave the table and then sit in this seat so I can have position on him. But as is, I'll just stay here. Being in position on the player that's not necessarily that good of a player is definitely a very good thing because that allows you to take the maximum amount of money from him. However, I found that, you know, being directly out of position on him is also not too terrible because then you get to raise his small blind every single time. And sometimes people who aren't very good players, you know, they think they have pot odds to call in the blinds with bad hands, and that allows you to play a lot of pots against them in position as well. So that's, you know, another advantage. So I think the best place to sit on this table would probably be this being seat, the best seat, Dr. Gage's seat being the second best seat, and then my seat being the third best seat. King 10 offsuit, this is a hand that if no luck raised and there was a good player in the big blind, I would elect to fold. It's a hand that doesn't flop very well. But if he would have raised there, I would have considered either 3-betting or calling, definitely, because I feel like he should be raising a lot versus this player. Here, I flopped a pair of 10s. I don't expect this guy to be making too many moves. Sometimes I would check here against a good player to sort of balance out my checking range, but in this spot, I'm just going to bet, hope to get value from something. I turned 2-pair. I expect him to have some queens in his range. I don't expect him to fold a queen. I also expect him to have a lot of jacks in his range, and I don't expect him to fold any of those. He could also have, you know, something like king queen or even king 9. So I'm going to be betting pretty big and expect to get called a good decent portion of the time, and I do get called. That's an awful river for me. I do expect him to have a queen some of the time here, and if he has something like ace jack, he now beats me. So I'm never gonna turn my hand into a bluff here. If I check, I don't expect him to be bluffing at me very often, so I'm gonna check and fold if he bets. So that's definitely a good result, and I'm very curious to see what he had because that's the kind of river that you know, whatever I was beating on the turn, a lot of those hands now beat me.